So I'm going back to my 2020 video formatting for this video specifically, just because I think there is a lot of stuff to talk about for Australian Survivor Redemption. If you don't know, Australian Redemption ended about 2 weeks ago, 1 week ago, I think. So I just wanted to give a quick refresher on not necessarily my opinion on the season because I'm going to be doing a podcast about that soon, but I wanted to talk about the state of Australian Survivor for a bit because for a while it's been in this weird stasis. That's not to say it's ever been in a bad spot or anything. It's obviously had so many high highs, and especially in comparison to, modern United States Survivor. There's just a lot of stuff that no one really got out of Australian Survivor that people still wanted out of both Australian Survivor and United States Survivor. So I want to talk a bit about all the new stuff we got out of this season of Australian Survivor, the new changes we got, some of the stuff that will be coming up for 2027 Australian Survivor, and stuff like that. So the biggest thing that we had in Australian Survivor Redemption is the host change. For the first 11 seasons, we had JLP, Jonathan LaPlagia, and he was a beloved host of not just Australian Survivor, but just Survivor in general. He was considered for a very long time to be the best host of Australian Survivor, and I tend to be one of those people that agree with that sentiment. Unfortunately, they cut him out after Australia versus the world. They gave the job to All Stars winner David Jeanette, and that was a big point of contention for a lot of people. A lot of people quit watching because they all thought, well, if JLP is leaving, then the show's just going to suck. And I do kind of understand the logic in that, but I was more cautiously optimistic than others were, mainly because JLP's placement as a host is a lot different than Jeff Probst's placement as a host because Jeff is both a host and executive producer. He has a lot of power over Survivor in general. He has a lot of sway within how seasons work, how the twists work. JLP was not as powerful as Jeff Probst was in that regard. Now, they pretty much signed David Jeanette on the second they learned about his win on Deal or No Deal Island Season 2, which he won an astronomical $5.8 million, or I think it's like $12 million in Australian currency, which from the math I've done is about you'd have to win 24 seasons of Australian Survivor to get to that money. So obviously David was a much cheaper option because he was already swimming in cash and he was a genuine Survivor enthusiast. He is never going to say no to Australian Survivor hosting. And I think a lot of people gave David too much flack for saying yes because he is a huge fan of the show. And if you were offered the chance to host and you feel like you would do good, you'd say yes too. But the big thing everyone wants to know is, did David actually do a good job hosting? Did David live up to JLP's name? No, but he didn't do bad. I think the best way to describe it is David does a great job hosting, but he's just a very different personality from both JLP as a host and David as a player, really, because in his Survivor games, he's a very loud, boisterous player. He is very theatrical. And in hosting, he's a lot more subtle, he's a lot more compact. He keeps a lot of the motions in more. I think a big part of his hosting personality can be comparable to Nico Panaggio from Survivor South Africa. Nico was a very good host, in my opinion, and Nico was a very cards to his chest, very subtle host. He never really showed much of what he was thinking to the cast. And only in those small moments, from time to time, did we see like flashes of Nico as a good host. And I think Nico did a great job. And I think David took a lot of inspiration from Nico, especially in Survivor Australia when Parvati said David has watched Survivor South Africa. So David does know about Survivor South Africa. And I think he, at the very least, inadvertently took some of Nico's goodwill into that. Now, as for the production itself, I think Survivor Australia Redemption had some of the best production of all time. A lot of Australian Survivor, the big turnoff for a lot of people is the twists. There are a lot of convoluted twists and a lot of twists that can drag seasons. I think a big one is the non-elimination tribals and the non-elimination episodes. There are a lot of non-elimination episodes in Australian Survivor, and that is a big turnoff for a lot of players, and I understand that. And for, I think, Redemption, we only had one non-elimination episode, and it was still a very important episode. It was not a twist that was, just this write-off twist that was just meant to cram time. It had a lot of big stipulations to the season and a lot of stipulations to future tribal councils. And I think it was handled pretty well, in my opinion. There's a there's a lot of complicated twists in Australian Survivor. I think the best example is Baron versus Bounty, which is funny because that's something we cover in Redemption as well. But in Brains versus Brawn 2025, there's a twist where essentially five people split onto a different camp and five people split onto another camp, but they're all on the same tribe, so it's not really a demerge. And it's just this weird amalgamation of just an unnecessary, complicated thing to cram runtime. That is all it was. It was an episode crammer because they knew that they were off track, and so they just needed to put some random thing and fix it. And while on a production standpoint, that's fine, it's just very jarring as a viewer to see that. And that is not what Redemption did. This was also one of the only seasons of Australian Survivor where we did not have a twist at the merge at all. I think there's maybe like 3 seasons of Australian Survivor altogether where there's like no twist at all at the merge. It's a Redemption, Titans versus Rebels, and it might just be those two actually. Yeah, it might just be those two. So, 2 actually. This is the second season where we have a completely vanilla merge. And let me tell you, as someone who has suffered through 5 years of New Era Survivor, I am completely happy to see a just vanilla merge. Another big change the season does is we get back the reunion. We have not had a reunion since All Stars, since 2020. Our first time in 6 years of having a redemption. And it's just so great to see these players come back and just have a live reunion and talk about the season, because that is what makes the reunion compelling. And the live reunions in, US Survivor just aren't that compelling because it feels like the losers have to ham it up. They have to just pretend that they're fine with losing and they did not just lose $1 million decision. And it sucks to watch. It feels brutal, and it's not something you want to watch through because it feels worthless. You're not getting anything. And I think it's much more worthwhile to speak to the whole cast than the merge group only. And if you haven't watched Survivor South Africa, there has not been an actual honest to God reunion of any Survivor since Australian Survivor All Stars. That would be the last one. We got a reunion back in Survivor South Africa Immunity Island in like 2022, 2021, I want to say. But there has not been much reunions yet. And to see just Australian Survivor Redemption come up voluntarily for a reunion, I think is big. Everyone knows Survivor 50 is going to have a reunion as well, but that was a fan vote, and it's very clear that we're not going to get a, regular reunion after this, at least for a long while, not till, 60 or 70 or whatever. And finally, the biggest thing, in my opinion, that is coming for Australian Survivor 2027 is we're getting a new like location for 9 out of 11. No, 9 out of 12 seasons of no, 10 out of 12. I keep forgetting to count Australian Survivor because it's just a 10 episode side thing. But yes, 10 out of 12 seasons of Australian Survivor are in Samoa. So we haven't really seen much location reach. We have had 2 seasons in the Outback with Brains versus Brawn 2021 and Blood versus Water, but those are 2 seasons that have their own problems for sure. So it's going into Malaysia. We know that. And we don't know too much of how it's going to look like, obviously. But if you have watched Survivor South Africa season 2, I believe, it is set in Malaysia. Now, the season itself, I don't think is very good. But I actually do really love the Malaysia location they film in. It is a very solid location. I think there's a lot of great visuals going on, a lot of great landscapes, a lot of great forest areas. There's just a lot of stuff that goes on. It's a very diverse location. I don't know if it's filming in the exact same location South Africa did, but if it is, then I think there's a lot that could go well for it. But yeah, I just wanted to speak on, the state of that Australian Survivor is in because honestly, I think this is the best Australian Survivor has been in terms of the actual production. It does seem like cutting off JLP may work out in the long run. Now, I'm not going to say JLP won't be missed. He was an incredible host. And I do hope we do get some kind of other season show of him hosting because he is an incredible host. He does his job very well. But it's very clear that in cutting JLP, they've done a lot of stuff with that extra budget. It's not just another blatant, US Survivor budget cut where it's just, oh, we're cutting out one thing, we're cutting out another, we're locking ourselves in Fiji just because, budget, and we won't do anything else after that. except make you all compete in the same twist over and over. I cannot believe that it is 5 years into the new era and we have not made any progress. The only reason we made progress in Survivor 49 was because of the medevac. That is the only reason. So to see Australian Survivor taking that jump and, evolving upon itself, I think is really great. Now, I'm not going to speak too much of my opinion of the season itself. That will be in the podcast I do in about a week or so. But if you want the TLDR, in my opinion, I think it is a great season that everyone should watch. I don't think it's the best season of the Australian Survivor. I'd say it's probably fourth on my list. I think there is a little bit of a lackluster end game. Those last 6 episodes I'm not too big on, but I think overall it's a very memorable season, and I think everyone needs to give it a watch. But yeah, I sort of wanted to, give a little analytical side of, Australian Survivor in the future, just because I think everyone was very pessimistic about Australian Survivor after hearing about JLP's fire. So to see it being in this state and not being, a complete dumpster fire, I think is a very good sign.